We are doing Siman Tes Vav in the Shagat, which is speaking about the Zman of Tefillah. Now, the Shagat Arya had brought in, he had quoted something from the Sefer Megillas Esther in the previous Siman, and the Sefer Megillas Esther is a Sefer written on the Sefer Mitzvahs of the Ramban, right? Not referring to the Megillas Esther, in the Tanakh. There are a few Svarim that have like the same name as a Sefer in Tanakh. There's a Sefer, Halacha Sefer written by Nachman called Sefer Yehoshua. So we have this Sefer called Megillas Esther. Anyway, one of the things that that Sefer had mentioned, which we didn't quote in the previous year, but something he had mentioned is that the Zman of Tefillah are only l'chachila. B'diavad, a person can daven the whole day, which seems to be based on the Gemara that we quoted in the previous year of Tefillah is Rachamim Ninhu, that Tefillah is Rachamim, and because of that, Rav Yochanan said if a person has a suffix, he's allowed to daven again. So therefore, he wants to take that to really a different idea, which is not discussed clearly in the Gemara, at least not on his side, which is that the Zman of Tefillah only l'chachila. But if you miss the Zman of Tefillah, you can still daven. Right, so let's say Shachris is until 4 hours. That's l'chachila, you have to daven Shachris in the 4 hours. But if you didn't daven Shachris, you can daven Shachris the 5th hour, 6th hour, 7th hour. I assume it has to be within the day. 3 tefillahs a day, but the timing is, it's not optional. L'chachila, you have to daven in the proper time, but if you miss the time, you daven whenever. That's the shita of the Megillas Esther. The Shagat Arya disagrees with it strongly, and he holds that no, the time is the time. You have to daven in the time. If you don't daven during that time, so then you can't daven anymore. And the Shagat Arya brings a few proofs to this idea. The first proof is the Gemara in Brachos Daf Chav Ches Amud Aleph. Amar Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. It's first Ma'ar Makom. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi says, "Kol hamispal tefillah shel musafin la'achar sheva shos Rabbi Yehuda alav hakasav omer nugi mimoed asafti mimcha hayu." So if he davens after 7 hours, according to Rabbi Yehuda, now according to Rabbi Yehuda is the shita, you only have until 7 hours. So then the pasuk says about that person that nugi, which we're going to see means he's going to be broken because of the time that he missed. So my mashma dahai nuge lashon lishna detavrahu. How do we know this word nuge means to be broken? Kidem mitargim Rav Yosef, as Rav Yosef was mitargim. Tavra asi also nean de Beis Yisrael, that a breaking will come to those that hate Klal Yisrael, which is really a euphemism. It means to Jewish people. Al da'achu zmani moedaya de Yerushalayim, that they passed the time, they were late for the time of the Moadim, which refers to the carbon musaf in Yerushalayim. And Yeshua ben Levi takes that to refer not only to the actual carbon, but if you miss the time of the davening of the carbon, then it's the same thing. That's what Yeshua ben Levi says. Amar Rabbi Elazar says, Kol hamispal tefillah shel shachris la'achar arba shos Rabbi Yehuda, that if a person davens shachris after the 4 hours of Rabbi Yehuda, alav hakasav omer, about him the pasuk says, he brings this pasuk of nuge mimoed asafti mimcha hayu. And my mashma dahai nuge lashna detzarahu, how do we know that it's a lashon of pain? Dechsiv dolfa nafshi mituga. So this lashon of tuga is the same shorish as the lashon of nuge. And if we see from there that the person's soul was pained. So that's that lashon of nugi means a lashon of pain. And Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak Amar, he brings a different pasuk, mehacha b'sula nugos v'hi marla. So the raya from here is a little bit of it takes a couple steps. But first, let's discuss musaf itself. Musaf, we know, is ma'akiv. The Zman is certainly ma'akiv for musaf. How do we know that? Because the Gemara says, well, we know that there's two shitas by musaf. There's the shita of Rabbi Yehuda, that musaf is 7 hours, until 7 hours, and the shita of the Chachamim, which is you could have a musaf all day. Those are the two shitas. Now, even according to the shita of the Chachamim, l'chachili should not be davening all day, and that's, we'll quote this Gemara, which is also in Daf Chav Ches Amud Aleph. It's actually earlier than the first Ma'ar Makom, It's the second Maramakum here. It's a little short piece. V'shal Musaf and Kayum. The sheet of the Chacham is you could daven Musaf all day. Rav Yochanan says v'nikra posheya, but he's called a posheya if he davens late. Exactly when he should daven is a debate amongst the poskim. It seems like the Shagas Aryeh understands like the shitas that explain that even according to the Chachamim, l'chachili should daven before 7 hours, within the first 7 hours of the day. So therefore we see that according to the Chachamim, when they say you have all day to daven, that's not l'chachila, right? All day to daven, the Tfilas Musaf is only a b'diavad. L'chachila, you really should daven within the first 7 hours. Therefore, when Rabbi Yehuda disagrees with the Chachamim, and he says that Musaf is only until 7 hours, that means b'diavad you only have until 7 hours. Not l'chachila, because l'chachila would be the same as the Chachamim. The Chachamim also agree l'chachila you should be davening Musaf earlier in the day. So the whole machlokas between Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim is b'diavad, means when's the last possible time I can daven Musaf, and after that time I can no longer daven. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, that's until 7 hours. According to the Chachamim, it's all day. Now we see from the Tfilas Musaf that there is an idea of a Zman Tfilah, which if you miss it, you can't daven anymore. However, that's not the subject of the machlokas between the Megillas Esther and the Shagas Aryeh, because the Shagas Aryeh points out that even the Sefer Megillas Esther will agree when it comes to Tfilas Musaf that you can't daven later, because the whole svara of the Megillas Esther of why I can daven outside of the times that were defined by the Chachamim, by Chazal, is because Tefillah is Rachamim inu. Tefillah is davening for Rachamim, so that doesn't have a set time, b'diavad. But a Tfilas Musaf is specifically for the Karban. That's not Rachamim, and it has to match the time of the Karban, exactly. And it doesn't have any connection with other types of davening, other types of Tefillah. Therefore, Musaf, for sure, everyone agrees that if you miss the time for Musaf, which according to Rabbi Yehuda is after 7 hours, you cannot daven anymore. The whole machlokis between the Megillas Esther and the Shagas Aryeh is only in regards to Shachris, Mincha, and Ma'ariv. Okay. However, we still have a raya from our Gemara, because what we see is there's two statements over here. One was a statement about Musaf, if you miss the time of Musaf, and missing the time of Musaf means you can't daven anymore. And therefore, we say that this pasuk, which says bad stuff will happen to a person if he does whatever is not clear in the pasuk, is referring to someone that misses Musaf. And he misses it means he can't daven anymore. And we say the same pasuk about a person that misses Shachris. Right, so it would seem that Shachris has the same din as Musaf, just like by Musaf. If you miss the Zman, you can't daven anymore. And therefore, we're going to say about that person, the pasuk of Nugi Mimoid, Asaf Mechahayu, we're going to say the same thing for someone that misses Shachris. Why? Because he can't daven anymore. It's going to be the same exact halacha. That's the raya that we see from this Gemara to the sheet of the Shagas Aryeh. However, if you look carefully at the Gemara, you'll see that it's not necessarily such a raya, because the statements of Rabbi Shimon Levi and Rabbi Elazar, right? Rabbi Shimon Levi speaking about Musaf, and Rabbi Elazar who's speaking about Shachris, are not exactly the same, because Rabbi Shimon Levi, he understood that this word nuge means tavra, being broken. And Rabbi Elazar, he explained that the word nuge means tsara, pain. Right? So it's a little bit of a different type of drasha that they're bringing from the pasuk. And therefore it's possible that we could understand this Gemara well and understand the difference between these two Lashonos according to the Megillas Esther. Missing Musaf is much worse than missing Shachris as far as the Zman. Because if I miss the Zman of Musaf, then I miss the whole Tefillah and I can't daven anymore. And therefore it's a Tavra, something very bad, a much stronger punishment, as opposed to a person that misses the Zman of Shachris, he did something wrong, but he can still daven. And that's why it's only a Tsar. And therefore this Gemara actually seems to fit better with the Megillas Esther than with the Shagas Aryeh. However, the Shagas Aryeh says it's not necessarily a proof against himself, right? We see that there's a difference, or you see clearly from the Gemara there's a difference between Shachris and Musaf. According to the Shagas Aryeh, there is no difference. So you could say really there is no difference. And if you noted that the first statement was made by Rishub and Levi, and the second statement was made by Rabbi Elazar, they were not made by the same person. If they were made by the same person, the statement was made by the same person, and they used two different Lashonos, so we understand there's an inherent difference between the two halachos. But if it's two different Amoraim making the statement, So it could be that they just have a technical machlokus about how to understand that word in the pasuk. What does the word mean? Yeshua Levi says the word means tavra. Rav Lazar says that the word means Sarah, but not because they hold there's any intrinsic difference in the tefillah that they're applying it to. And it could be, in fact, that both Musaf and Shachas, if you miss the Zman, you can't daven anymore. Why does Rabbi Shimon Levi use the word Tavra and Rav Lazar use the word Tzara? Because that's what they held, that the word of the pasuk means. They have a machlokas on how to explain the pasuk. So therefore it ends up that this Raya in the Gemara is inconclusive to either Shita. But one thing we got out clear, though, is when it comes to Musaf, though, that everyone agrees if you miss the Zman, then you're finished. However, we do have two Gemaras which seems very clear, like the Shabbos, that you cannot daven after the Zman is over. One is going to be the Gemara on Chavav Amud Aleph. And we'll see the Mishnah and much of the Gemara here, and just see from the whole discussion of the Mishnayos and the Gemara, it seems that there's a time, and the time is a time, and if you miss the time, you can't daven anymore. As it says, Tfilas HaShachar ad Chatzos. Tfilas HaShachar is till Chatzos. Right? This is the main Mishnah that speaks about the Zmanim. Rabbi Yehuda Omer ad Daled Shos, until 4 hours. Tfilas Mincha ad Ha'erev. Rabbi Yehuda Omer ad Plag HaMincha. Tfilas Ha'erev ein l'kfa, there's no set time for Ma'erev, you could daven it all night. Shom Musafim Kol Yom, you could daven Musaf all day. Rabbi Yehuda Omer ad Zayin Shos. Rabbi Yehuda says Musaf is only until 7 hours. V'reminhu, we'll ask a steer against this. It says, Mitzvasa im hanitzachama. K'dei sheyismoku l'tefillah, you really should be davening at nitz. So you could have a smich, or the mitzvah of Kriya Shema, is what this Bryce is talking about, should be finished by nitz, so that you could have a smichas gula l'tefillah. V'nimsam espal b'yom, and you'll end up davening during the day immediately at nitz. So it sounds like this man for Tfilas Shachris is nitz. So the Gemara answers, Kitanya hi vasikin. That Bryce is according to those that are no heg like vasikin. The Amar of Yochanan says vasikin, the people that were careful with their tefillos, hayugor mosanei sachama, they would finish Kriya Shema by nitz. V'kuliyama ad chatzos, but everyone else would daven until chatzos. Shachris, according to the sheet of the Chacham, that you have until chatzos. The Gemara answers, Vasulo, you can't daven after chatzos. V'amar of Mari Breder Rav Huna, Breder of Yirmi Bar Ava, Amar of Yochanan, Ta'a bo ispal arvis, mispal shachar shtayim. If a person made a mistake, and he didn't daven arvis, so he davens shachris twice. We're holding over here in the middle of the third Ma'ar Makom, discussing whether or not this man with tefillah or makiv or not. So, if a person made a mistake and he didn't daven arvis, so he davens 2 shachris. He makes up his ma'ariv. Shachris, if he missed shachris, fal minchas shtayim. He davens 2 minchas. So we see that you have a little bit of a leeway when it comes to the times of davening. So the Gemara answer is kul yom matzli v'azal. You can really daven shachris all day, right? Because if you missed the zman of chatzos, you enter into the zman of mincha, and then you could still daven shachris if you missed shachris. So ad chatzos yavili schar tefillah bizmana. If you davened before chatzos, so you get the schar of davening in the proper time. Mikan ve'ilach, for after that, schar tefillah yavilei, you get the schar of davening, but schar tefillah bizmana lo yavilei. We don't get the time of tefillah bizmana. Right, so this sounds a little bit like the Megillas Esther's shita, which is there's a time, but you could daven afterwards. However, I'm continuing and skipping a little bit, into the next section of the Gemara which I copied, which is a little bit farther down on the daf, and it says, Meisvei, we'll ask a stira towards the end of that line. Me'uvas lo yuchal iskon, something which is twisted and can't be fixed. V'chisar lo yuchal livnos, or something which is lacking and it can't be counted. Me'uvas lo yuchal iskon, that's a quote from a pasuk, and now we're going to explain each part separately. Me'uvas lo yuchal iskon zeh shebito kriyash mashal arvis v'kriyash mashal shachris. So the first part of the pasuk is talking about someone that missed kriyash shema. O tefillah shal arvis, o tefillah shal shachris, or davening ma'ariv or shachris. And something which can't be counted is someone that was supposed to join his friends to do a mitzvah, and he did not join them. So we see from here, though, is that if you miss the zman, so then you can't daven anymore. It's something you can't fix up. Amar Rav Yitzchak, Amar Rav Yochanan. So Rav Yitzchak says name Rav Yochanan. Hachamei Eskinan. What are we talking about in this case? Shebatal b'mezid, that he missed the time on purpose. Amar Rav Ashi, and Rav Ashi says, Dekanami diktani batal v'lokatani ta. It could also be medayik that this brisa, where we're speaking about this idea of muvas l'yuchal iskon, something that can't be fixed up, it uses the word batal. It doesn't use the word ta'a. Up until now, we kept using the word ta. Ta means made a mistake. Made a mistake means it's by accident. It's by accident, we'll let you make it up. But on purpose, then he can't make it up. Now, if the Megillas Esther is correct, that the Zmanim of Tefillah are just l'chachila, but b'diavad he could daven the whole day, so even if he didn't daven on purpose, right, so he was mevatel his mitzvah l'chachila, but why couldn't he daven later on? Instead, what we end up seeing from here is that there's a special din for someone that was ta, someone that made a mistake, and because of that didn't daven, he didn't daven b'shogeg. There's a special dispensation in him that he can have a tashlumin, he can make it up, and even the tashlumin has its own rules. Right? It's not just the din that you could daven whenever you want. Right? If a person misses Arvis, he has to daven 2 shachases. There's a special din of davening 2 shachases. You can't daven the tashlumin before. You can't just say, well, it's not nighttime anymore, but I'm going to just daven Ma'ariv now. No, you have to wait until you daven shachas. Then you have tashlumin. That's only in a case where you made a mistake. Right? So it's a special din of tashlumin. And even if a person misses mincha, he gets to daven 2 Ma'arivs, even though it's the next day, right? Which is really quoted in the Gemara that we skipped. But the point is, it's not this idea that you can have the whole day to daven. It's a special din tashlumin that the next tefillah you're allowed to make with tefillah before, only in a special circumstance we made a mistake. But certainly if a person purposely missed the zman of tefillah, so then he missed the zman of tefillah. Right? So we see here from this Gemara very clearly that the zmanim are not flexible. The zmanim are even ma'akiv b'diavad. If a person doesn't have the proper zman, then he cannot daven afterwards. And another raya he brings is from Tosfos in Brachos Daf Vav and Beis. Let's see the Gemara there first, which is Os Daled in the Mar Makomos. Rabbi Yehuda says ad arba shos. They only have until 4 hours in order to say Tfilas Shachris. Ibailuhu, the Gemara asks, ad va'ad b'chlal, o dilma ad v'lo ad b'chlal. When we use the word ad, do we mean to include the 4th hour, or are we not including the 4th hour? Does he have 3 hours to daven during the day? Right, 1, 2, and 3, and then when he hits the 4th hour, it's already too late? Or does he have, including the 4th hours, he has 4 hours in the day in order to daven? So which way do we look at it? And the Gemara goes through all the different proofs, one way or the other, but we're not interested specifically in this halacha of until when davening is. We're interested in what Tosfos says about it. Tosfos says on this question, Ibailuhu ad vad b'chlal. Tema, this question is a wonder. Da Amar Benida Perik Haroa Kesem, because we said in Maseches Nida, Kol shiurei chachamim lahachmir. Anytime we have a shir that the chachamim give, we're always machmer. And so you want to know if it's ad vad b'chlal or lo ad vad b'chlal. The rule is you always have to be machmer. So let's say, what would be an example? Let's say the shir of a sheretz is a adasha. So do we say that means it has to be bigger than an adasha? Or if it's an adasha, it's already tummy. So if it's an adasha, it's already tummy because that's the more chumra way of looking at it. The only exception is chutz mi kegris shel ksamim, except for the size of a gris of ksamim. And if a woman has a stain of blood on a garment, so the shear is a gris is a type of bean. If it's that size, she's tahar. It's only if it's bigger than that size, then she's tummy. So in that case, we're makel with the shear as far as ad b'chlal or lo ad b'chlal. Alma, so then we should say ad v'lo ad b'chlal. That we say ad v'lo ad b'chlal. We should say that in our case, right? We now have our question. The chacham gave a shear, went to daven shachris, and shachris is until the 4th hour. So we apply a rule. We have to be machmer, and he only has the first 3 hours of the day to daven. Right? That should be the simple understanding of the statement of Rabbi Yehuda. We shouldn't have to be asking this question as a separate question in Maseches Brachos. The answer is, ad va'ad b'chlal yishbo gam chumra. Ad va'ad b'chlal also gives you a chumra. Right? What would the ad va'ad b'chal means? You have also the fourth hour. So I have more time to daven, but you think it's a kula, it's actually a chumrah as well. Sheyispalel, because then he has to daven. V'lo amrinan avar zmano batul karbano va'afil b'mizid. And we wouldn't say that if the time passes, then he wouldn't be able to daven, even b'mizid. There's what happens if a person comes to the Rav and he asks the Shaila, it's already the fourth hour, and I didn't daven yet. Do I have to daven or do I not have to daven? So if we say ad va'ad b'chal, the Rav would say, yes, you have to daven. And if not, he'd say, no, you don't have to daven. So it's a chumrah to have to daven, right? I mean, in a way, it's a kula, because that means during the third hour, if I would ask the Shaila, do I have to daven now or can I wait till the next hour? It would be a kula. You say, no, you don't have to daven now. You can wait till the next hour. But once I'm in the next hour, it turns into a chumrah. Because if I didn't daven yet, so then I wouldn't have to do anything if the time's over. But if the time's not over, so then I have to daven, so it's a chumrah. But what we see clear from Tosfos is that once the time's over, then you don't daven. Right? If we held like the Megillas Esther, that the timing is just a lichachila, but b'diavad you still have your chiv of tefillah, so then it would turn out that it's only a chumrah, an earlier zman. Because that means lichachila, you have to daven by an earlier zman, right? So if you'd come before the time and ask the shayla, it would be a chumrah, you have to daven early. And even if you come after the zman, you'd still have to daven. So you don't have any kula. In which case, this question would stand. Right? Why wouldn't the Gemara just clearly say that the earlier zman is the zman? In fact, the maskana of the Gemara is that the later zman, right? You have the whole fourth hour. According to Tosfos, it works out well, because you have a kula and a chumrah on each side. But that only works if you understand like Shaag's Aryeh. If you understand like Megillas Esther, so then you have no, you'd have the problem with this Gemara. Okay, I'm going to stop here.